Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your favorite time of the week. It is March 11th, 2018. You are listening to Adults Talk About Cool Stuff. This is ATACS episode number 33. I'm your host, Paul from Atlanta, and joining me today on our esteemed panel is Mr. Ryan from New York. Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
How are you today?
I am fighting a sore throat, so hopefully you will not hear any gurgles or coughing or chewing cough drops from me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your sore throat, but given the weather that you guys have had, I guess it's not altogether too unsurprising. Next but not least, Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. Hello, Will.
I'm just so excited not to be least, you know.
You are not least. In fact, some would say you're most. So, you know, that's awesome.
I'm the most something, you know.
You're definitely the tallest. We'll definitely give you that one. And we also have Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hello, Flex.
I will happily fill the role of permanently least, so no one else has to do it.
That's very selfless of you. I'm glad you're gonna take that role. Now we don't have to fight
I'll
about
take
it
this
later.
hit for you guys.
So we're adults. We're talking about cool stuff. We're going to be talking about video games amongst some other stuff. And I think the place that I want to start today is from the frozen wastelands up north. Mr. Ryan, what's been going on in your wheelhouse recently?
So do you want? So I guess there's Monster Hunter. Obviously, maybe we'll save that for later. Of the games that are not Monster Hunter, I have two. Would you like the positive news or the lukewarm news?
You know, I think we should end on a high note. So why don't you do the lukewarm news first, and then we'll ride up the mountain to positivity. Okay,
that's fair. So I've been playing this game from 2008, I think, called
Good year.
Dead Space.
A good game.
It's a video game.
Uh-oh.
I think I've got
This is our bi-weekly segment of Ryan Hates Games I Love.
Yeah. I'm kind of in that camp too.
So hate would be a strong word, although I think around chapter 4 I was like, do I really want to finish this? It started to pick up a bit, but for all the love that game gets, it has its moments where I'm like, okay, I see why people like this, but there have also been quite a few moments where I'm like, this game really isn't that great.
Permission to treat the witness as hostile. I do have one serious question for you. So, you're playing it on PC, right?
Yes.
Are you wearing headphones?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Are you playing controller or mouse and keyboard?
Controller.
Okay. All right, continue. I'll have further questions later.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to know, what's not clicking with you about it.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I'll start with some of that. And I mean, the game has started to pick up, so I'm hoping it'll I think I just hit chapter 5. So I'm hoping it'll kind of start riding high, but... I guess there are a number of things. I mean, the port's not perfect. I haven't noticed any game-breaking issues per se, but some of the controls are kind of busted, and the inventory menus and things like that are a little wonky. So that's, I guess, been a little immersion breaking. But yeah, I guess it's just a combination of things. The games I've played that are most comparable to Dead Space, I would say, might be like Resident Evil 4 and 5. So those are, I guess those are kind of the classic comparisons. And for Dead Space, I feel like it doesn't have quite as much personality as those games. It's got some cool set piece stuff, but then it also kind of does, just a lot of really monstrous creatures. I think it relies a lot on some kind of cheap jump scares. And I found myself at times kind of rolling my eyes, and it's like, okay, what's going to be around this corner? I think gameplay wise, I haven't really liked the progression. the game has dumped tons of plasma cutter ammo on me, and I found that everything I need to kill basically everything. So I haven't really been motivated to buy any of the other weapons. It keeps giving me ammo for random weapons, and then I go to the shop and it's like, man, do I really want to spend 15,000 credits on this flamethrower that I've never seen before when my plasma cutter is basically getting the job done?
You don't want the flamethrower.
Well, that's good. That's good to know.
There are guns that you do want, like the Ripper and maybe the line gun.
Oh,
but the
flamethrower
you do not really want.
Well, so I just sold all my Ripper ammo because I was like, well, I should probably do something with this giant hoard of resources I'm sitting on. But the game never really gives you any way or reason to, other than just buying those weapons and trying them. And I'm playing the game on normal, so I have tons and tons of ammo. Like, that hasn't been much of an issue.
Okay.
And there is an achievement for beating the game with just the cutter.
Well, I am well on track to do that. I've almost fully upgraded my cutter, and I haven't purchased any of the other weapons. And as of now, I don't have a strong motivation to do so. Yeah, I almost quit. I had to do this asteroid shooting segment, and I was like, man,
oh no,
the controls.
That thing is
these
famously
controls
frustrating.
are garbage, and this game. This is not, for all this game was doing already. That's kind of meh. It's like this was almost the cherry on top.
I ended up beating that game on the highest difficulty, and the asteroid sequence was easily the hardest part of that game.
So.
The regular combat controls, do you like those? Because my favorite part of that game is crowd controlling hordes of enemies, cutting off limbs to make them crawl, push if you have weapons that do pushing stuff, pushing enemies around. The combat loop of that game was endlessly awesome to me, and they do a great job at putting you in different environments to constantly give you different looks at that and give you different kinds of enemies to interact with. So yeah, the controls in the asteroid shooting sequence is not great, but to me, the regular gunfight controls, it's kind of Resident Evil 4 version 2. I felt like they kind of refined how Resident Evil 4 played, and for that kind of methodical, over the shoulder third person shooter, to me, Dead Space controls as good or better than anything in that space. So those controls, did you not like those controls either? Because if you don't like the controls in the combat at Dead Space, there's nothing really else there for you. That's what that game's about.
Yeah, so there's one other thing I wanted to mention that I just thought about, and then I'll get on to what I have liked about the game. I just also remembered the sound design. I think it's kind of neat, some of the ambient sound effects that they use, but then what I don't like in those, which I'm not a big survival horror game anyway, but I don't like when survival horror games throw in that kind of white noise and that that kind of suspense building background noise, and then they also throw enemies at you and it kind of gets in your way, which I think Dead Space does some of that as well, which I find a little annoying. But yeah, as far as what I have liked, I do think some of the powers, the stasis and kinesis, are actually kind of cool and thematic. I don't super love the spacewalking stuff, but I think it's kind of neat the way that they use that to mute the sound of the enemies, so it kind of creates this different dynamic. And then, yeah, I just finished this fight where you fight this unkillable enemy.
Regenerator, yeah.
But it gives you a stasis recharge, and you kind of have to manipulate him a certain way. And that was when, maybe halfway through the game, I don't know how far it is, but that was the fight that clicked with me the most. I mean, the other parts of the combat, it's I shoot this guy twice in the leg and then once in the claw, and it's okay, I'm done. I don't know. It's been kind of fun, but it's never, I guess with all the progression issues and with all the kind of ambient sound issues. And I don't know, I think the controls are working okay, but I'm not fully confident that the port, with the way sometimes the controls are a little finicky in the menus and stuff, I'm not always confident that I'm getting like the true Dead Space experience. But it seems fine. It hasn't been an issue. So I don't know. I'm hoping it picks up and they lean a little bit more into the action-y stuff. But it's
interesting to me that you're like, and I know a lot of people describe this game as survival horror, but to me it was always more of a pure action game from the start. And it sounds like some of the gripes you have are in like the quote unquote, the parts that are quote unquote more survival horror style in the atmosphere. And I guess I always just viewed it more as a straight up action game, like campy action game.
I think, for me in this particular game, it's like there are a lot of games like last year. I played both, the Evil Within 2, or I don't know if that was this year, but one of those years. Some year I played it. The Evil Within 2 and Resident Evil 7. And both of those were, quote unquote survival horror. But to me, I guess I don't like it when the horror comes from like not being able to like move and not being able to like control well and like getting it messed up. So, the things that I think are good about Dead Space, I think you have to think about the fact that when it came out, it was revolutionary because of the lack of HUD, so you don't have these little ammo counters on the bottom of your screen. You've got your health on the back of your suit, your gun, you pull it up and you've got that little almost touch screen thing that shows you how much ammo you have. And I mean, and that I'm not a difficulty guy, but it really might be worth it for you to kick it up, because to me, this game is all about like that sort of tension. Like, am I going to have enough ammo? Like, the ambient noises. I mean, that's a lot of people, I think, praise the game for that same sound design because of how it ratchets up the tension. It does sound like it's not working for you, but I know it did work for me. I was kind of always on the edge, and so it was kind of thrilling to play it,
Yeah, and I think just the quality of the sound design is really on point. Like, just from an execution standpoint, like, that game sounds really good. And I also, like Will talking about, like, kind of the little atmosphere or, like, HUD touches and stuff they do. Like, this was a game that probably a lot of games have done stuff like this since, but this is one of the first games I remember playing where, like, they don't do a lot of pulling you out of sequences. So, like, if you're in a dialogue sequence with your screen, like, you can still walk around or manage your inventory or something. Or there are scenes where, like, I don't know, tentacles will like grab you and pull you along, but you can still shoot during that. Like, it's not a canned animation. Like, you still have control. And I remember that stuff being really neat, of like kind of roping in like set piece moments that transition really smoothly and you're still in control.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do like some of those things. I think the HUD touches and stuff like that are neat. And it's hard to believe it's been 10 years now, but
yeah, I mean, 10 years is also an eternity in video game design too. So, it's just something else to kind of think about.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like, had I played it when it came out, I probably would have been more positive on it, especially on like a 360 or whatever. But I don't know. It seems like it's getting better. I'm hoping that it picks up and does more of the action-y stuff and the less of like slow crawling through hallways waiting for some enemy you can't hear to pop out behind you.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes those scenes where you actually are in 0G that much scarier, is because like the way that the sound kind of cuts out completely, and so that the enemies, they could be right behind you without you really knowing in those zones.
It's kind of crazy because in my head right now, I can actually hear what that game sounds like in 0G. And I haven't played that game ever, but it's such a distinct, iconic sound that like I can hear it right now.
Yeah. But I'm glad you're trying it, man, even if it's not really like, clicking with you.
So I need to hear this from everyone who's played Dead Space. Give me your best Isaac Clarke stomp sound. Your best Isaac Clarke scream while stomping.
He has like at least 3 of them.
I would love to be there for the like recording session for that.
So for our graphic for this particular ATACS, instead of having the Dead Space logo, it's just going to be a scream. That's just what it's
nice thud too whenever it hits the ground.
All right. So you said that you wanted to talk about something else, Ryan?
Yeah. So on a much more positive note, which Dead Space, like it's not like it's total trash barrel. It's just I've been struggling a bit.
Back of the box quote: Dead Space, not total trash barrel.
You can put my logo on that.
Oh man.
But on a more positive note, I have been collecting Rhythmia, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Okay.
Go
All
on.
right. Continue.
Yeah, so I have been tapping my way through some Final Fantasy Theatrhythm curtain call.
That's a good video game.
Yes.
That is a good video game. It's
You've been playing a lot of great video games lately.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that game, I mean, obviously I kind of like rhythm games. I'm not the most rhythm game heavy guy, but good ones will click with me. And that game has a lot of great music. It's just a ton of fun to like sit down and, I mean, Eternal Wind, like I probably play that song like just about every time I play that game, but it's kind of fun to just randomly rotate through the menu of Final Fantasy music and like remember, regardless of how you felt about the games themselves, sometimes like you can still just really enjoy most of that music.
Even my lesser favorite ones have great music.
Yeah, and I mean they do some really cool things too. I mean, I haven't played a ton of rhythm games outside of like DDR and Guitar Hero, but they have like different modes depending on what kind of a song it is. So if it's a battle song, you'll have your party of Final Fantasy characters, which you can rotate out, and they gain levels, and you can equip them with abilities and things like that. So there is this almost RPG element to it, which, just as an aside, I kind of wish they would make that even more of a thing. Like, I think it would be super cool.
That gets pretty deep. I mean, I went decently far down that rabbit hole for being able to maximize Rhythmia and do other things like that. And those systems get pretty complex, especially with the unlocking the new characters and then characters having innate abilities and things like that. There's a lot there. I'll send you a 6 megabyte gamefacts.txt file. But there's a lot there to that system if you really want to try to min-max it.
Yeah, I've been fiddling around with it and I enjoy it, but I don't think they require it as a core part of the gameplay. And I don't know that I would want it to be like chained or anchored to it, but it would be kind of neat to see them tie a little bit more of the gameplay into that, to be like, okay, in order to do this tougher dungeon, you really do need a higher level party. And you don't just need to execute the songs all really well, or something like that. But that I digress. Like, I think that's cool. I think that's a cool thing they've done, making that kind of RPG party layer to it. And I think it would be cool to see them do something even more with that. But yeah, it's like, so you do a battle. If you do battle music, like you have your party of 4 characters, and like the I guess icons or dots or whatever that you're trying to keep rhythm with are coming like left to right, and if you miss, like the monster will hit you, and if each time you hit, depending on how well you hit, your party members will attack. So you want like your party members to have higher strength values so they'll kill more monsters during the course of the song. Whereas then, like, if you're playing like a Final Fantasy theme that's not a battle theme, like maybe it's like world map music, they'll turn that into what they call like a field music song. And so you'll have like your character will be like walking across the screen, or like flying an airship across the screen, and like the challenges will be different. Like you'll have a lot more hold and release timings, or like you'll have to like keep your style, you'll have to move your stylus like up and down to kind of follow the music. It's just kind of neat the way they've created like different categories with different gameplay modes, and like they kind of made those characters like, I think they've done a lot of really cool things with that game.
I think as far as like the 3DS goes, I've probably picked up and played that game more than just about any other game for for that console. Like, I would never play it for like 100 hours straight, but it's pretty much the thing that's always in my console if I'm just taking my 3DS with me somewhere. And I don't know how much time I've put into it, but it's definitely a lot. That's a really good game.
Yeah, I also put a good chunk of time into that. I think I ended up beating every song on the highest difficulty, and that game has a lot of songs. And that's in addition to just playing through the, what do they call it, quest mode?
Yep.
Yeah, they have like different quests.
Yeah, to like unlock all the characters and level a bunch of them up to the max level and all that stuff. And yeah, it's not as deep as it could be, but there's still definitely some depth to like the customization stuff. And like, I even think there's it's very simple, but the core mechanics, especially my favorites were the battle themes. They're just very fast paced, but like just the simple tapping and sliding, swiping and holding and that stuff, like that stuff's fun to do if you're playing along to good songs, which most of the songs in that game I think are.
Yep.
It's just a fun time.
I agree.
Pro tip: I started the game just using the or the DS speakers, and then I hooked up my headset, and the songs are just way better.
Yeah, I bet.
Headset.
You need to hear Matoya's Cave in the best sound quality possible.
I was really surprised because, I mean, the DS speakers aren't terrible, but they just cannot compete. Like, I think, that game must have like full quality audio tracks that just those speakers don't do it justice.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But yeah, I would always play that with headphones on, and that's definitely the way to go.
And if 220 songs isn't enough, there's a whole slew of DLC songs you could buy.
I saw that. I don't know. It's still early looking at the 100 or 200 or whatever ridiculous number of songs they have for me to be committing to DLC.
Yeah, there's so many songs in that game.
Yeah,
but it was kind of neat to see and I think they have like some old, like obscure Square Enix or Square.
Yeah, there are some non Final Fantasy songs in there. Like there are some Chrono Trigger songs, some Seiken Densetsu songs, I think there were some original Nier songs, some Final Fantasy Tactics, some maybe Legend of Mana. Like there's some creative stuff in the DLC.
Yeah, the latest DLC notification was like had songs from like Live a Live, which is like this Japan only like Super Famicom RPG that's
great. Seems
kind of obscure. I was like, cool, I guess. I think some
That's
Saga
funny.
music.
That's funny.
That game's a lot of fun.
That's definitely a good one.
So, do we want to do a Monster Hunter block?
Actually, if you don't mind, Flex, I know that you wanted to talk about Monster Hunter, so let's just hold off on the Monster Hunters talking until we get around to Flex.
Fair enough. Well, that's all I got.
All right. Will, what you got going on?
Well, I had a couple of things. It's been about a month since I've been on the podcast. I was at a conference last ATACS, though I did listen and catch up on all the monster hunting.
Yeah, you did.
A couple of games I played recently that I really enjoyed. I've played a number of things recently, but I just decided I'd just pick the ones that I thought either could use maybe a little extra attention or were particularly great. So the first one I wanted to mention was a game called Far From Noise.
Okay.
I mentioned something about it in the general channel, I think, when I was messing with it. But the premise really is it's sort of just a kind of a conversation of a game. I guess it's about as long as a movie. And the premise is that when you start the game, you're in a car on the edge of a cliff, teetering back and forth. And I guess in some ways you're kind of role-playing your way through this story. But there are a lot of really, really interesting things to think about being in that certain situation. It's like, do you maintain your cool? Do you freak out? And I think in a sense, I mean, when you talk about the ways that things can happen to people, whether it's like, I don't know, like an aneurysm or one of these things, that can really take somebody out kind of quick, in a sense we're all teetering on the edge of a cliff. but anyway, I think it's an interesting thing, and if if you're into kind of story driven games, that really kind of have an interesting philosophical tint to it, it's also absolutely hilarious. It's kind of got this sort of and I guess in moments like that, all you can do is laugh. If you're sitting on the edge, I mean, like how ridiculous it is that I found myself in this situation, that I'm like hanging on the edge of this cliff. So I think it's probably one of the top 3 funniest games I've ever played, as well as being very poignant. There was one gripe I had with it in terms of, I think it kind of gets lost a little bit in terms of whether you're actually playing through someone else's story or whether you're role playing this sort of piece. But I think the whole thing is kind of made by, this one guy. So it's a pretty awesome achievement.
So what's the gameplay like? I mean,
mostly you're just clicking through some conversation, and you can kind of choose how to respond. It's sort of a dynamic conversation piece.
Can you tell me about the multiplayer?
There is not.
Where are we talking about? Team Deathmatch, King of the Hill, Capture the Flag,
Car on the Cliff, I think is the only mode.
So 100 cars parachute into a map.
Yeah.
So 100 deer parachute out of an airplane.
Right. There you go. And
sorry, I'm not trying to derail you here.
Yeah, and they you need to find a weapon before the circle closes, and your car falls off the cliff.
Great. So is the whole game kind of in this one scene where you're on the cliff, or
basically,
gotcha.
And because
I just feel like every screenshot I've seen of this game has been that one shot.
Yeah, but of course at one part it starts raining really, really hard, and that kind of causes some panic. There's one part where it gets really, really windy.
Okay.
Does
it ever snow?
No, it doesn't snow. Okay. So there could be room for DLC.
Does the deer talk?
That would be giving away something that I don't want to give away.
All right.
Don't answer that question then.
But yeah, it might. Anyway, so that's the first thing I played, and that's probably one of my favorite games that I played. That has been released in that was a 2017 release. So I was a big fan of that jam.
Nice.
Anybody have any
that looks neat
burning questions about Far From Boys?
How long is it?
About an hour and a half. About as long as a movie.
Okay.
Shorty.
A good shorty. Yeah, I might check that out. That seems cool.
It's cool. Other thing I wanted to mention is a game called Steam Tactics. Which is so indie that it can't even handle it.
Is this Steam as in the distributing platform by Valve, or Steam as in like Smoke? What kind of tactics we talking about here? Okay.
Smoky Tactics. But it is a game that's on Steam.
Okay.
And basically, it's sort of like, and so I guess it's kind of like steampunky. Maybe that's why they went with the Steam Tactics. Okay. But you control this sort of like fleet. yes. You control this fleet of.
Wow.
Is the corgi
ships.
Are the corgis part of it?
Yeah, he's one of your main characters. His name's like Benedict or something.
For listeners, I'm looking at a logo that was posted in our Discord, and it has a picture of a corgi with a pilot's hat on.
Yeah, he seems pretty serious. But so you have a crew of these anthropomorphized pilots. I think there's also a frog, a fox, and a cat. And you can equip weapons on these guys. And the weapons kind of have certain patterns. So they might shoot like 2 hexes away or 1 hex away. And not only do you have to move into that range, but they can only fire at that range.
Okay.
So the kind of interesting piece of it is kind of on that grid, trying to kind of move your pilot into a specific spot where he can actually attack. And so there can be interesting variants there where maybe another pilot will can fly in a way that blocks you. So if you can only fire 2 spaces away and someone else moves in 1 space away, then in some ways they can kind of close the distance and keep you from being able to attack at all. And then if you can attack the exact range and direction that the enemy attacks you, then you'll counterattack. So
Okay.
it can be beneficial, for instance, if you had multiple weapons with multiple attack patterns. But it gets even more interesting towards the end, where certain hexes will increase how much damage you deal or increase how much armor your ship has if you're in those hexes. So there's a lot of tactical fun in it. It's actually, I think it's a really clever game. The main, I think, issue with Steam Tactics is that it's one of these games that kind of expects you to kind of grind a little bit, So
Okay.
like there are 3 different difficulty variants for each level, and eventually you'll get to a level that it's just pretty much way too hard for where your guys are. And at that point, you're like expected to go back and play like the 2-star difficulty of the first level and kind of move on from there. And then you'll hit a 2-star and a 1-star that you can't beat. And then you'll go back to the very beginning of the game and play like the 3-star difficulty variant of the first level. And that's all stupid bullshit. But
All right.
But the core tactical piece of it is actually I thought was really, really interesting. There's a lot of thought that you kind of need to put into where you move. And then of course there are 6 different types of weapons, and each ship, there are multiple ships you can get, have different resistances. So it can benefit you to kind of see what type of resistances and guns the enemies are using in a particular level, and you can kind of go back and switch yours out to something that might be more effective. Because if you run up against someone who's like really heavily armored against what you're shooting, you're just going to get shredded.
Gotcha.
So I thought it was a cool thing.
Okay.
And there was only one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it was another story game.
Okay.
That's called My Name Is You.
Hello.
And it's weird, right? And I think it's got a lot. It's kind of like Kafka-esque in a way. If anyone's ever read like Franz Kafka, this sort of like, I guess, kind of absurdist, nihilistic sort of situation. But
I'm a big Kafka guy. You know me.
Yeah. So yeah. But the thing is, it's like, as you're playing the game, it's also a narrative game. It's somewhat like Far From Noise in terms of gameplay. You're basically just kind of going through the story and making choices. But it's interesting in that as you're reading about this character, you, and the character's name is you, like, you get kind of confused from time to time, like, because you think it's talking about you, but that actually plays into the themes that the story is kind of coming up with. So the story kind of plays into sort of like escapism and pessimism.
Okay.
And it's got this real sort of like cold, like almost like Arstotzkian feel. Like, if I was gonna,
yeah.
Yeah. So
speaking my language.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a pretty short thing. I mean, I think it's got like 10 or 11 endings. I just played like for 2 of the endings because I kind of made all the decisions I wanted to make. I don't know. I've never been a super big fan of the games that are like, keep playing until you get all the endings. I'm like, I'll just play until I feel like I've made the choices that I'm happy with. And then
and I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair way to play those.
But I thought it was pretty clever. And I play a lot of these little like experimental story games, and those 2, that Far From Noise and My Name Is You, I thought were much better than most. Far From Noise is probably better than My Name Is You, but My Name Is You is a pretty unique little situation. But that's cool. I don't know. That's all I've been rocking.
Right.
I mean, I've been playing other games that suck, but those are the ones I wanted to mention.
Right. Those are the ones that you felt like you had interesting things to say.
There you go.
I can't believe that you ever play any games that are not of the highest quality, Will.
Well, I appreciate that vote of confidence. I have to, just like Flex has to be, the least. Sometimes I have to be the guy who tries all the weird games to find the good ones.
Yeah. I think you're probably gonna get a new title, ATACS' indie game correspondent. So you can go and you can explore those waters and let us know what's good and what's not so good.
I'll try. I'll do my best.
Will lives on itch.io.
So there you go. So
those are actually even a little too weird for even me.
Once you start, all of your games are from itch.io. That's when we know you're deep down I'm
down the indie rabbit hole. Yeah.
So we're gonna bring it back to the studio for our in-house analyst for mainstream games. Flex, would you like to talk about Monster Hunter first, or do you want to talk about the other games that you've been playing?
The other game being an indie game that I spent the most time on.
That's right. It's up to you. So we're going back out in the field on the Indie Games
Well,
Express.
let's just keep on this indie game train.
All right.
So I've been playing a lot of Into the Breach, which is the next game from the FTL people, Subset Games, I think.
Yep.
And yep, that is an indie game, and it's really freaking good.
That's what I've heard.
Yep, it is like wormed its way into my psyche in like that kind of way where it's like, oh, you start seeing Tetris pieces in the world. Like that's how like my brain now works. Is like, oh, if I move this here, I can push this and then like grapple this and then knock this into the water. And so it's like,
yeah, I've had a couple of those moments. You know, one for me was, I think after playing Oblivion, I was really into the alchemy. And so like I knew that like I think blue flowers, there was some kind of blue flower that I could use to make like a poison. And so I'd walk around in my real life and I see a blue flower and I'm like, oh, awesome. Oh, no, I'm not playing the game right now.
yep.
And then I did the same thing, I think, when I played a lot of Metal Gear Solid 5. I'd see like a giant like red shipping crate and I'd be like, cool resources.
And then you've attached your balloon to it.
Right.
You know?
As you do, as one does, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I do that anyway, like, you know.
But yeah, that's
yeah. Yeah, it's really got its hooks in me. That Into the Breach is really cool. And I even say this as someone who like part of me hesitates to call it a roguelike. But like it's kind of got like it is run based, so like it shares some of those similarities, but like it is by far more than other run based games. Like really, really grabbed me. And I think a lot of that is in the variety. So like each time you start a run, which a run probably lasts 2 or 3 hours tops, you pick a squad to use, and like a squad always consists of 3 mechs, and all of the mechs have very different abilities. So figuring out ways to combine those and like make use of their abilities is endlessly fascinating to me. Because like some of them will deal high damage, some of them will do some kind of pushing effect or pulling effect or like shielding or all sorts of things. And like sometimes I'll like grab a new squad, one of the new squads, because you unlock new squads as you go. And I'll like get into a map and it'll be like, how do I do anything with this? And then like you start really thinking about it and processing it, and you're like, oh, okay, like I see how this works. And it's like, it really shows off like how robust the core of that game is, that so many different mechs can be useful and different strategies can be useful. And I guess to clarify for anyone not familiar, this is a turn-based tactical game, so it all takes place on a grid and you take turns moving units around. And the grids are actually pretty small, so like compared to like, I don't know, an Advance Wars or a Fire Emblem or an XCOM or something like that, like these grids are 8 squares by 8 squares. So like they're pretty small, and your units can probably move like 4 or 5 squares maximum.
That's really small for that many units. I mean, because you have like a team of 3, and then you face 3, 4, or 5 enemies. Or does it ever get more than 5?
It can. So yeah, like most maps, if you're on normal difficulty, most maps you'll start and there will be 3 or 4 enemies on the field. But every turn, 2 or 3 new enemies pop up. So if you're not killing enemies quick enough, you can very quickly have like up to 10 enemies on the field, which at that point you're pretty much done.
That gets crowded.
Yeah. But then there are also buildings and mountains on the map too. So like there are static objects taking up some of those spaces.
Yeah, so you don't have 64 squares every time. It's just that makes it even more crowded.
Yeah, you never have 64 squares. But yeah, they make really good use of that space, and like a lot of the like coolest moments in that game are like, oh, if I like just had like one more space to make room in, you know, this plan I have, or like, oh, if this wasn't right up against this, like there's that game is so much about optimizing what you have and like trying to puzzle your way out of very tight situations. And you really have to make use of everything at your disposal, which makes it feel like nothing is wasted, which I really like. So like every single battle in that game is like, all right, I got 3 mechs. They can each have 1 move and 1 attack. Like, how do I stop as much damage as I can with this? Like, how can I optimize this the best I can? And that's been a really exciting process.
One thing I'd like to hear you kind of reiterate, and we talked a little bit about this, is some of the ways that this game kind of subverts some of the common annoyances that we have about roguelikes. And I don't know if you wouldn't mind speaking to that for a few minutes.
Yeah. So yeah, like part of me even hesitates to call it a roguelike, but it does share some of that stuff. The main thing it does share with roguelikes is it is run based. So
okay.
you play through, each playthrough is 2 or 3 hours. And then, you know, you go through, you have your progression, you either beat the game or you die, and then you start back over. But a lot of the things that I really like about it that is often put me off of most roguelikes is there is way, 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 way less randomness in this game. Like you have your starting mechs and they have their abilities, and I am very confident thus far in the squads I've seen that the game is beatable with any squad without getting any additional upgrades.
Gotcha.
So like, yeah, so like as you go, you can find, so the flow of the game is there are 4 islands, and on each island you do 4 regular battles and then like a boss battle. And then at any point after you beat 2 islands, you have the option to go to the quote unquote final battle if you want. But at the end of each island, you can go to a shop and there will be like some random weapons that you can purchase in that shop. And that's kind of like the main form of randomness in the game. But like most of my playthroughs, I don't even buy anything. I just roll with the starting weapon. So like that stuff, you know, like I felt very confident that like that stuff works and is viable. And like that to me is huge for these games. Cause like normally when I think of something like, I don't know, Spelunky or FTL or Downwell or like some of the other roguelikes I've played, like my best runs always come from when I find like that one really good item. It's like, oh, I got the teleporter in FTL, or I got the jetpack in Spelunky or something like that.
Right.
Like, yeah, and it's like, all right, if I happen to randomly find this item, my run's going to be way better. And like that feeling I do not get at all in Into the Breach. And that's really satisfying to just kind of know that like, all right, I can do this with the starting stuff. Like I don't need anything else. And it's like most of the stuff I find is not necessarily better or worse than the stuff I start with. It's just different functionality. So it's like, all right, if I want to like alter the way I play a little bit, it's like I could trade out for a different weapon, and like maybe you could find something that synergizes a little better for what you want to do or your play style. But like what you have at the start is great and works.
Yeah, and you actually just hit on something that was one of my minor complaints with FTL. I played a lot of FTL, and I actually did end up, beating the very end, like Rebel Battleship or whatever it was called. And the issue that I had was I felt like it all depended on whether or not I found like this 1 or 2 things. If I found it during my run, that thing is dead. But I had to find the thing, and whether that thing was the teleporter so I could beam my troops onto their ship or some form of weapon or whatever, it did feel like it had a little too much of an element of randomness to it. So it sounds like they've kind of really dialed that back for this game.
Yeah, it's been dialed back a lot. And that was 100% my biggest complaint with games like FTL and Spelunky and whatnot is, it felt like my success on my run depended extremely heavily on the items I found. Because like I never actually beat FTL, and I made it to the final boss multiple times. And like every time I did, it was like, well, I just don't feel like I have enough good stuff to beat this.
I might have played some FTL, and I might have beaten that final boss dozens of times. And I might have some contradictions to the points being raised here, but I digress.
Do you think you could beat FTL with your starting gear and not buy anything?
No, probably not.
Okay, so just whether how much you agree that it matters or not, like you do need some stuff to come your way. And that's what I like about Into the Breach is you can literally buy nothing but like your upgrade points, and those are always available in the shop. So there's no randomness to that. And I just really like that. And I even like, so like even within the battles themselves, so like it's turn based, and the enemies, like they move into position, and then this is to me one of the really cool things about the game is they move into position and then it actually like telegraphs how they're going to attack. So I don't know if anyone's seen videos of it or not, but like it'll be like, all right, this enemy is attacking this building, this enemy is attacking this mech of yours, and like it basically telegraphs all the attacks, and it's like, all right, now it's your move. So like you're like, okay, how can I stop all of this? That's laid out. So like you're really planning and puzzling out like how to best make use of all your moves, which I think is a really fun. It almost makes it more of actually, I would say it does make it more of a puzzle game than anything, because it's really like, all right, everything's set up. How do you figure your way out of this jam and solve all of it? Which has been strangely satisfying to me. Like it's really cool to just puzzle your way through that stuff, and like you'll see the enemies move and you'll be like, man, they're attacking a lot of stuff, and then you sit there and stare at it for a while and then puzzle your way out of it, and you're like, okay, this is solvable. Like I've many times like found that I can get out of stickier jams than I would have ever thought. It's been really fun so far.
Yeah, sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know what to make of it before, like because I mean I like stuff like FTL and Spelunky, but like didn't get super hooked on them, so like I didn't know what to expect going into this. But yeah, it's grabbed me pretty good. It's got some pretty good like style and music and stuff as well. The same guy who did the FTL soundtrack did this.
Your boss comes up to your cubicle and like you see him telegraphing his attack, and you're like you're trying to like dodge. You're like, hang on.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I see the red arrow coming from it, and I'm like, all right, if I just like push you, then you're going to attack like my neighbor, and that's
Perfect.
Way better.
Yeah, you're like, I think that Susie might know a little bit more about what you're about to ask. Just go ahead and deflect.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that stuff's. Yeah, and you can knock enemies. So one of the squads I played with, just to give you a little bit of the flavor. So the starting squad is very basic. They just like your main mech like punches enemies, and which deals damage and pushes them. Like some of the other squads will have mechs that like just do some pushing and stuff, but like a little bit of the flavor is one of the squads has this passive effect that says enemies deal additional damage to other enemies, and then they have a lot of pushing effects. So I think they really are designed around pushing enemies so that they attack each other, which is pretty amusing to set up.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's like 8 squads or something, and they all are very different styles.
Solid.
It's fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get into that noise.
Yeah,
I think you'd probably like it.
And for as much time as I put into FTL, and as much like the amount of praise that I'm hearing for this game from just about all quarters, I think I need to start looking at that one too, because that seems like it will be a lot of fun.
Yeah. If you're not into like turn-based tactical stuff, then like that's the only reason I can think of to not give this game a shot. Like, otherwise, it's just really well done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This was for me. You know, my general approach is to wait and see, and to not, you know, which this wasn't really a pre-order type thing, but as soon as I saw it come out, and you know, just caught a little wind of the hype, I was like, yeah, I'm on board that train.
Yeah.
It looks pretty good.
It's pretty good. I like it.
All right, so are we ready for adults to talk about Monster Hunter now?
It sounds like you're ready and raring to go, Paul.
Oh, God, just going to jot this note down. Monster Hunter, all right.
So this is 2018's Persona, and Paul is taking Ryan's spot here.
Yeah. This is total role reversal, but that's
okay,
that's
Paul.
Okay. That's okay.
I survived. I have the T-shirt. I survived the ATACS Persona 5.
Yep. So I'm certain that I can also survive the ATACS Monster Hunter blocks. So that's perfectly fine. But so are you guys level 1,000,000? Have you killed all the biggest crabs in the world yet? I don't know how any of this works. I've never played Monster Hunter in my life.
I've not seen any giant enemy crabs yet.
Okay, all right. Then
It's probably in the DLC or
that's
the
probably
next.
in the New Game Plus. You have to do that, and then it's connected to the starting area.
Yep.
Anyway, Monster Hunter.
Yeah. I mean, probably not a ton of updates. Like we both kept playing it, of course. Still a bit from the end. We've been gearing up to fight a monster called Nergigante, which
What?
is Nergigante.
That sounds
I'm
amazing.
going to type this in our channel here.
All right, Nergigante. That's how I'd pronounce that.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Nergigante is one of the quote-unquote elder dragons, which my understanding of how the end... I think we're basically approaching the end game, and I think there's going to be probably in the realm of 3 or 4 or maybe 5 big elder dragon fights, and that's kind of like the final stretch. But rumor has it they're pretty tough. Yeah. Paul just posted a picture of Nergigante in our Discord chat. And
I put it in Google. It's a dragon with big horns and a whole lot of spikes and stabby things. That looks problematic.
Yep, he's supposed to be pretty tough. So yeah, we've been gearing up for that. So that's what a lot of my play has been over the past 2 weeks. Yeah, we're approaching the end game, and it's been trying to get proper gear and all that stuff. So I think now I'm at the point where I'm feeling the grind a bit. Because we were hunting some Diabloses so I could make a better charge blade. And it was we had 2 fights where I didn't get the part I needed, and it's well, that sucks.
So it's kind of like crafting. You have to go farm the mob that you need and hope for the drop to go craft the item. Is that kind of...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So all of your weapon and armor are made out of monster parts. There's no experience points, no leveling up, so you don't grind that way. This game is 100% gear based. So I wanted to make a Diablos charge blade, so I needed to go hunt Diabloses and make an axe out of their parts.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and the gear, the armor is the same way. So now we're hunting this thing called basil juice, so I can make some basil juice armor.
Okay.
And yeah. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Which, to be fair, we're probably... I don't know that we're probably over preparing a bit.
Potentially, yeah.
Because we're basically forging some of the top available gear we have, hunting the toughest monsters at this level. I suspect we could go in without necessarily maxing out and still take him down.
Yeah.
My hope is that if we do this, we can hopefully run through most, if not all, of the remaining fights pretty well.
Yeah, we're at the point. So we're at, I guess we're already kind of sort of spoiling the structure of the game a little bit, but just fair warning. So we're at, I think it's 7-star. It's high rank. So the game kind of has these quest tiers. And we talked a little bit, I think, on the last episode, how we all kind of felt like there was a lull kind of at the top of high rank, which is around 5 stars, and the bottom of low rank, which is 6 stars. And we've kind of passed that. We're in 7-star now. As you do the main quest, you kind of advance. And basically, some of the pieces of gear we're seeing now, you would see in a in-game build spec, maybe a piece or 2 of the armor, the weapons are kind of well in that area, so we're definitely approaching that in-game stretch. But we haven't unlocked that last tier of the toughest monsters. And yeah, we're kind of gearing up now. And yeah, Flex is right. There are some items, some monsters have rare drops, so it's if you want to forge the top tier Rathalos sword, which Rathalos is this winged fire-breathing wyvern. It was kind of a traditional dragon with a spiked tail. Mm-hmm. His top-level sword might require this ruby, this quote-unquote Rathalos ruby that has a 3% drop rate or something like that.
Oh, that's real low.
Yeah. Making most of the gear is from common parts, which are very easy to get, but the very top level gear, most of those require a rare piece that has a very low drop chance. So usually you can make it to where like your drop chance is like 18%. It's like somewhere in that range if you do these things called investigations. But for some of the parts, that's about as best you can get. And if you need 2 or 3 of them, that's pretty rough.
I mean, I guess 18% is. I mean, obviously it's a lot better than 3.
Yeah.
But still, like that just seems like it's like, all right, I'm going to spend a whole lot of time, and crap, it's not there. All right, I'm just going to do it again, and which is a little like an MMO, but I don't know. There's just something different about those sort of chances whenever I'm thinking about it in terms of how much effort that you're expending into that every time that you're doing it, just from what I've read.
Yeah, it is definitely MMO-ish, and there's like, fortunately, the grind, like this level of grind, has not been there until this in-game stretch. Like up until this point, everything's been pretty easy to make for me, at least. The other thing, and the thing that makes it all work, and this game would not be worth it if this was not true, is that the combat loop is still very fun. So, like going out and hunting a Diablos or a Rathalos or whatever, like, is still a fun process. So, like, going on these hunts is still exciting. Otherwise, yeah, the grind would not be worth it. And I think it really is just to make like those very high tier weapons. It's like, if you want the best of the best, you need the rare stuff. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's not really anything wrong inherently with, like the grindy bits. It's just, it feels like for a lot of the stuff, the grind could be bad, it could be good. A lot of it depends on the gameplay. So if you're still having fun with the gameplay piece, then I could see where that wouldn't really be as big of a deterrent, kind of.
Yeah, I think the grind is there. There's definitely some MMO, there's some MMO stuff in the structure of this game for sure. But if I wasn't still enjoying the loop, I wouldn't still be playing the game.
And I guess the only things I would have to add is 2 things. One is that, I think we talked about this last time a little bit, like the Elder Dragons themselves actually have a bit more of a boss fight mentality. They have like some special mechanics, and you have, even if you're well geared, like they can have some really nasty attacks with like low margins of error. So I think we haven't seen as much of that element of the game, which is kind of exciting. And then, like we talked about, like I still enjoy the gameplay loop. Like I felt a little bit of the slowdown, but at the same time, like, while Flex has been farming his pieces, like I've had a chance to try out like a couple new weapons, the Great Sword and the Switch Axe. And, the Great Sword, I find, it's a new play style, and it's a lot of fun. And then the Switch Axe I've been messing around with, and maybe not so much. But yeah, I was always kind of interested in it, and I threw a cheap version together and started messing around with it. And it's like, well, I may need to watch a tutorial or something, or maybe this just isn't for me.
The different weapons being very different, like, I think does add a little bit of legs to this game, because like, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say each weapon feels like a completely different game, which I've heard people say about Monster Hunter before, but they are very different. Okay. So like, that's a cool way to shake things up if you get tired of whatever weapon you're using. I've still been sticking to Charge Blade and Bow as my 2 weapons, just because I'm not gonna. I don't feel like spending the resources to make other stuff, because then I may have to go hunt some more stuff. But like, that is a cool way to switch things up.
Okay. Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know if we've said this before, but it's almost like a fighting game type thing. If you end up playing a fighting game for long enough, you might switch characters to characters who are kind of similar, and then maybe try stuff that's completely different. And if it's a game you play a lot, whether it's you're playing it with your friends or it's just got its hooks in you, like, it's kind of neat. Like, if you invest enough time in it, you may well find yourself like flipping around to kind of learn new move sets and play styles. And there's definitely some of that in the Monster Hunter world.
Definitely a big difference between Killick and Valdo. I'm just going to throw that out there.
You're not wrong.
So,
Yeah, it's still going with it. I've put a ton of time into it, but I wanna see it through.
what's y'all's hour count, just out of curiosity?
I think mine's around 60.
I think mine's at around 80.
Yeah, 60, 70, somewhere in that range.
So, what's your feeling? Is this like a 100-hour game, 120, 1,000-hour game? Like, what are you thinking that this one's going to be for you guys?
I'm gonna guess around 100 probably.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I might go
it's
a
Persona
little
territory.
farther.
Okay.
And for me, I've spent a lot of time, doing just like because I had a more time initially than Flex and Nate. While they are catching up, I've done a lot of unnecessary side hunts. But
Yeah.
I could see myself like getting at least one top level gear set, and that could add another 10 hours or so to it.
Yeah, there's no like I could totally see someone like if you're really focused and just going through the game, I bet you could do this game in like 30, 40 hours. But if you're doing a lot of side quests and crafting a lot of gear and trying different weapons like we kind of have, then yeah, it can easily take 100 hours or more.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious just to try to get a feel for, like how big the legs on this game were.
It's a biggie.
Yeah,
and even once you beat it, you could go back and keep doing stuff like you can get gear from the final boss. So if you wanted to make their gear set, which is probably really good, you dive in back into the game after you do that and keep going on hunts.
All right. Well,
I don't know if Will or any of the rest of the crew end up getting it and getting all the way to the top, but I would love to see maybe later this year like us do like a really tough 4-man hunt, because there's some difficulty scaling and your weapon choices and like the monster's like ability to hit you like kind of scales up once you get into bigger and bigger teams.
And I will say for like post-game support, they have weekly events every week, and it always seems like there's at least one or two of those that are way harder than anything in the main game. So I think that's how they keep the game fresh for people who do keep gearing up after the end game.
That's how they make the game as service.
Exactly. You got it.
So that actually sounds a little like Destiny, except in a completely different setting, but like with having weekly events and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny because I've actually heard a lot that a lot of Destiny players have switched to this game because it's like feeding their needs more than Destiny is.
I mean, that makes sense. But then again, Destiny's always been one of those games that you're not supposed to play it nonstop forever. Yeah. You're supposed to play to a point and then quit, and that's how you have fun with it.
Nobody told Activision this.
That's very fair point.
Activision probably knows it. They just don't want you to know it.
Oh, those jerks keeping secrets. All right. So, is there anything else that we wanted to touch on for Monster Hunter?
I think that's good for me.
All right. So I've been playing a couple of things that are very familiar that I will not spend a whole lot of time talking about. I did finish my New Game Plus for Final Fantasy 15. I was very surprised to see the amount of content that they added to the single-player game in between my two playthroughs. There were some extra cinematics that were fully voiced as though they were part of the original game, some extra dialogue options. They filled in a lot of the backstory which and lore of the world, which again is just really weird to see for a single player game. And then,
if you don't mind me asking, did they? Because I mean, I liked Final Fantasy 15, but I do think it's storytelling. Like there were moments where it's like, there were a lot of moments where it's like, why is this happening? And then if you kind of step back and you see the way they tried to fit it together, it's like, okay, they really needed to fill in some gaps here. Do you think they've done like a good job on that, or do you think they've kind of?
So I would say that they have done a good job, but they've only done about maybe 3/4 of it. Okay. But the fact that they're still planning on releasing 4 more DLC episodes, and they just added a whole bunch of stuff into the PC release, they're still patching story into this game, which is kind of wild. They're not doing so insane. Yeah, they're not doing anything to change like the gameplay. So if you're someone that sat down with this game and you just really did not like the warping or the attack, defense, parry sort of like simplistic combat, then they're not changing any of that, except that they have now made it to where you can switch characters. So if you don't like the way Noctis plays, you can play a different game with Gladiolus because his combat style is completely different. So they have done something to address that. But the core with you running around with Noctis hasn't changed. They added a big cinematic at the very end of the game that was not there before, which just about changes the ending, which is wild. And yeah, they're still planning on future content updates and DLC through the end of 2019. So
Wow.
they have released 3 DLC episodes: Gladiolus, Prompto, and Ignis. I did start on Gladiolus. It's not great, but I've heard they get better. And they're going to release another 5 DLC episodes. The next one to come out is episode Arden, who's the villain. And then there's going to be 4 unannounced episodes to come out. And they're still planning on patching the single-player game from now, like I said, till the end of 2019. So, there are a lot of criticisms that I think are completely legitimate for this game. But I am very surprised at the amount of effort and the amount of work that they have put into it after it's come out to try to make it a more cogent storytelling experience. And for the most part, they have succeeded. So if...
Well, they did spend 10 years making it, so it would be kind of nice if they did make it as good as possible.
I was going to say, like, just them releasing Final Fantasy 15, I was kind of happy to see that. And, for all its flaws, like, I still liked it, and it still kind of made me optimistic about the future of Final Fantasy and the fact that they seem to have realized its problems and are maybe working to fix it. I mean, it doesn't necessarily improve the experience for me because I doubt I'll get back to that game anytime soon, if ever, but it's still like, the fact that they finally figured out how to release it and they're figuring out how to fix its problems, like, it's kind of a hopeful, positive sign for the future of Final Fantasy games, at least in my book.
Yeah, they've actually added large amounts of content and area for you to explore. Minor spoiler, there's a time jump in the game where you go from where you currently are sort of into the future. They've added a lot of content into that future world that you go to. It's like a whole new outdoor area. Don't go too far. The mega weapon is there, and that's new, and that's the newest, hardest boss fight in the game. They bumped the level cap from 99 to 120. And I mean, honestly, I think that by early 2020, if they stick with their own content plans, whatever version of Final Fantasy 15 that exists in early 2020 will be so different than what was actually out on release that, I can't remember a single player narratively driven game that's had this much stuff added and tweaked and changed from its release just all the way through its life cycle, which is it's just kind of wild. And by the way, there's a multiplayer component now. So if you want to play the game multiplayer, you can do that. I don't know what it looks like.
Of course there is.
But there's that now. Like I say, it's just kind of crazy.
Team deathmatch.
Kind of, yeah.
Boy.
So there's been that. And I, like I said, I just started on episode Gladiolus. And that one's not very long. I'll probably play through the other 2 episodes, and then I'll put that one down for a while. And then other than that, I did pick up and mess around with Stardew Valley a little bit. They've added some patches and some content there. I was kind of checking that out and seeing kind of what was going on. Multiplayer patch is still slated to hit here in the next, I think, month or 2, which I feel like I've been saying that for the last 18 months in a row. And that's been kind of fun just to see sort of what they've still been doing on that game.
They're because that's just a one person joint, right?
So yeah, but the multiplayer piece, I believe that the developer is getting help from Chucklefish to get all that pulled together. So that component the creator had some help with.
Okay.
But with the multiplayer patch, which is free by the way, they're actually releasing a new slate of single player content for that game as well. No one really knows what that is or what that looks like, but again, this is a game that came out a while ago. Relatively large content updates like a year and a half later, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, that's so. I just imagine this person's life is for the past 3 years or whatever has just been like, all right, keep updating this game I made.
Yep, And I mean, honestly, the stuff that they've been doing to it has made it a better game. So
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's not so much different now that I would sink another 100 hours into it, but it's just kind of fun jumping back in, playing for an hour or two, be like, oh, they added this, they moved this, just random stuff. But I imagine once the multiplayer update comes out, Steph and I will go back and we will spend some time with that just to see kind of how that works. Because we both really wanted that for a while whenever we first started playing. So I'm curious as to how the implementation shakes out.
Yeah.
And it's a free update. It's not a DLC. So that's
So yeah,
kinda neat.
I have a curiosity to ask you, and this is something I've been thinking about with games in general a lot. Is would you, as a fan, prefer him to keep making big, meaningful updates like this to Stardew Valley, or release Stardew Valley 2?
So he's actually working on a game that has been starting to get advertised. It's it's a bit different. It's like Stardew Valley meets Harry Potter.
Okay.
And I don't remember the name of the game off the top of my head. I'm sure I'll think about it as soon as we sign off.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So it's going to be a different twist.
Yeah. So it's not going to be farming. It's going to be
cool. Yeah.
you're in magic school. I would rather him go on to make new things because I feel like that other than the multiplayer, I don't know how much more they can add to Stardew Valley to make it interesting for me.
Right. So I guess the other question is, if he did make a product called Stardew Valley 2, would you want it to be very different from Stardew Valley?
I think it has to be. I mean, because Stardew Valley already took what I consider a relatively well-established formula and added enough twists and polish to it to where I don't know that you can twist it and polish it anymore to make it any fundamentally different. Now, it would be different. Like, there's obviously a bajillion Harvest Moon games. If Stardew Valley was...
I'm sorry, I think you meant Story of Seasons.
I don't mean Story of Seasons because I'm old and it's Harvest Moon. I'm planting my foot.
Super Nintendo represent.
Yes, right.
You grew up in the 90s, clearly.
Clearly, I did. But like, if I thought that there were any meaningful changes that could be made to that formula, I would love to see a Stardew Valley 2. But I don't think there's really much left there. I think this is pretty much the perfect incarnation of what that formula is.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I was curious your thought on that game in particular, because we're seeing a split right now in a lot of franchises where some keep putting out sequels that are basically the same, and others take the road of keep updating, like Stardew Valley's doing, instead of putting out a sequel.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to make any grateful, meaningful changes, then having a sequel is not a bad thing. But I mean, like even like Final Fantasy, like I was just, they're not reinventing the gameplay. They're filling in a bunch of the stuff with the story and cinematics and lore, and that feels more like something that should be a patch versus something that should be Final Fantasy 15-2.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you want Final Fantasy 15 too?
I do not want Final Fantasy 15-2. Not. Well,
that makes two of us, Paul.
You didn't want Final Fantasy 15-1, so that's fine.
I did. I just wanted it to be good.
Burn. Last thing I want to touch.
Drop
on.
mic, exit stage right.
Yep, there you go. You're done. Last thing I want to talk about is World of Final Fantasy. Steph and I picked that up with the hopes that could be our next game that we pass the controller back and forth on the couch. And so the best way to describe it is it's a whirlwind tour through all of the nostalgia of Final Fantasy mashed with Pokemon and done very poorly.
Great.
I was really
I always wanted.
curious. So you're playing it on the PS4 because I thought I saw your name pop up on.
Yeah,
PSN.
I mean, I was playing it on the PS4, but by the second hour of tutorial that I couldn't get around, I stopped playing it on the PS4.
Okay, yeah, because I think I played that at like a Comic-Con demo or something like that, and it was, I didn't really know what they were going for. It's like like a third-person adventure RPG. Am I remembering it correctly, or
it's basically Pokemon? I mean, you are running around, third-person RPG. There's two members of your party. It's the brother and the sister, and that's really all that I got into. But I got so frustrated with the voice acting, with the actual lines that and the story and everything else. It's like this isn't worth it. Like I can't get into this. So I bounced off that one pretty hard.
Does it have co-op? Because that was the one thing I thought could have been cool, is if it was almost like a Seiken Densetsu or Secret of Mana with some like couch co-op type stuff. Did it have that, or did it not really?
No, it didn't. It didn't have anything like that.
So it just really doesn't have anything going for it.
I mean, I don't know who this is made for. It feels like a product that's geared a little bit more towards children, but
Yeah,
a lot of
I remember watching Giant Bomb's quick look for it, and I think this came out around the same time Final Fantasy 15 did. I'm not sure.
Somewhere close.
Yeah, but it almost seemed like you said, it's got some Pokemon influence, so it's not quite like old school 16-bit JRPG, but like it seemed like it was a little more of a throwback, and towards a younger audience. So like it seemed like that was kind of the way it was going compared to Final Fantasy. It almost seemed like they were like, all right, Final Fantasy 15's like the big HD blockbustery thing, and then this is more like a throwback or kids oriented thing. I don't know. It's a weird.
Yeah, and the problem with it is that it relies so much on the nostalgia, at least from what I've read.
Right.
I didn't get that far, but like a kid's not going to know who Yuna is. I mean, he might, but if this is geared towards like 10-year-olds, then the 10-year-olds aren't going to have the long history with the Final Fantasy series that you would probably need to appreciate all the references.
That's true. Their
So I don't
target
know what they
audience
were
is for
doing.
people who weren't even born when Final Fantasy 15 started being made.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like it's and so I
That's
don't.
really funny when you say it out loud.
it's also true.
It
isn't
also
it?
could be true.
Oh man.
That cracks me up.
So yeah. I mean, there might have been a good game there, but the tutorial was never ending. It was very painful. The English voice acting was horrible, and then we tried to switch over to Japanese voice acting and English subtitles just to see if we could make that any better. But even though the game gives you the option for Japanese voices, that was like a special like pre-order bonus for you to actually download the Japanese language pack.
Great.
So we could switch over to Japanese voices, but it turned all the character dialogue off. And you can't buy the Japanese voice pack. You can't download it. It was just a pre-order bonus if you pre-ordered the game, however many years ago that it came out now. So like, it's just like all of those little things just added up to me saying, you know what, there might be a good game here, but I'm not going to find it. And I just put it down, and then I started playing other things. Cause
I think you might have made the right decision.
Yeah. So anyway, that's been sort of what's been going on in my world. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or thoughts about any of that stuff, but I was pretty pretty disappointed with World of Final Fantasy.
I will not play that game then.
Well,
play that game.
we always have to end on kind of like a a down note, don't we?
Well, we're not going to end on a down note.
Today's was pretty positive, though.
Yeah,
Maybe Will can send us out on a good note too.
Yeah, because Will, you got something else that you wanted to.
Yeah, so I wanted to get the opinions of the podcast on an issue, and I thought it would make for perhaps
Kill it with fire.
Interesting discussion. So, and Flex already knows about this situation. So I write a lot of Steam reviews. People know this.
Right.
And basically, I wrote one for a game, and I gave it a 6 out of 10 because, I gave it a not recommended because it had an absolutely terrible menu. And and I looked at some other reviews. That was sort of a common situation.
I played this game a few years ago, and I agree.
And so and this has happened twice before. This is the third time this has happened.
So the game is Tennis Elbow 2013.
Right. And the developer responded to my review and said, he said, the menus are hard to get used to, but I designed them for myself. So once you get used to it, you'll be able to get through it very fast. And I was like, that's not a thing that you should say. About your game, first of all. And so he showed me how to do some of the things that I wanted to do in the menus. He took screenshots. He posted 4 responses on there.
It's really something. Yeah.
And so we went, so I went back, I reinstalled the game. I figured out what he was talking about. And basically the thing is it's you have, not only do you create your characters, are your actual character, but you have character sheets for your potential opponents as well. So if you want to make your opponents harder, you have to go into your character sheet and then hit an over button to pull up the character sheet of your potential opponent, and then you can make him stronger. So it's not the type of thing where you host a game, pick the difficulty of the opponents, and then just start playing. It's almost like this weird, like, you have all the tennis and then you sort of host the game with all of your characters and all of your courts, and then you bring someone into that or something like that. It's a really bizarre system. And so I replayed it, still didn't really like it, and just kind of stopped again. Then I got a message. He had friended me on Steam, and he says, "Hello, I'm the author of Tennis Elbow 2013. I wanted to know if you had seen my answer to your review and if you had checked
I like that he's
you
the
could
author.
customize your opponent." And I replied, "Hi, yes, I did see your answer. Thanks for your response and attention. Is it okay now? Would you like to know something else about the game?" I said, "No, thank you for following up. All right, then. If by any chance your opinion of the game improves in the future, please remember to update your review." And I am kind of torn about this thing because it's like the things that I thought weren't in the game were in the game, but this is kind of like legitimately my experience with it, and the menus are legitimately terrible. And so I guess I was just curious, like, with like Paul and Ryan, like those of you who haven't heard this story, what are your reactions to this? Like, do you feel like I did a disservice by leaving the review up in its negative state, or?
I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts. Ryan, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
No, go right ahead.
All right. So this is one of those things that, like, all right. So it doesn't matter who he made the menu. If the menu is not easy to use, then that's a problem. Like there are, and I mean, Steph could probably talk a lot to this. Like, there are these elements to design that you have to follow to make it make sense to everyone who's like there and like using the stuff. So like the fact that you couldn't figure out stuff from the menu doesn't mean that you're an idiot. It means that he didn't do a good enough job of like putting that stuff out there in a way that is easy to understand and easy to use. So now I think it's kind of neat on like one point where he like tried to reach out to like make it better. I mean, I know he was probably like his goal was probably just to have you go and give him a positive review because he didn't want your review driving away his sales. But at least he took the step, even if it was kind of pushy. So I do give him a little credit for that, but I take that credit back away when it's like, you reached out to the customer, but instead of improving your product, you try to change the customer. That never really works. So I think that your review is spot on for you, and also it's echoed in like what some of the other people were saying. The response from the developer shouldn't have been, "Here's how you use my game better." The response should have been something along the lines of, "Let me take this feedback I'm getting from my customers. Let me modify these menus in a way that makes it easier for them to understand," and then you move on from there. Because that's just kind of what he's supposed to do, not supposed to turn around and say, "No, this is how you need to change this."
So I can see that.
That kind of sums up my knee jerk reaction to that story.
Gotcha. How about you, Ryan? You got any thoughts on this?
I mean, I guess like this is kind of tough. I feel like, but basically,
I thought it would make for good discussion at least.
I think Paul kind of hit the nail on the head. Like what you've described to me, and even if you step back and remove the specifics of the situation, like I remember if you ever talk to people who work in UX, or there's some really interesting. I feel like I've read a few interesting like video game design and developer articles about how the game developer may have had a certain intent for a system, but every time they do player testing, and it's the same thing with UX, like user experience for basically any kind of software. It's like when you watch people sit down and interact with your product, like you'll see them do things that you didn't expect.
Right.
A lot of times, and if it's well designed, that tends to be less. And you'll see game developers, I feel like, have some kind of interesting introspections on how they've had to remove things or change things. I mean, even I think, like XCOM, for example,
Right.
even for really simple user interfaces. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it was a tough thing because, on the one hand, like I was really glad that, he, like you say, he cared enough to reach out. But on the other hand, I felt like almost sort of like an integrity piece of mine. It's like, well, do I review the game that I played for 5 or 6 hours, or do I review like the game plus these pieces of information that I got extra?
Yeah,
that's something I was going to touch on. Is like you're not getting paid for this, so like it's kind of whatever. And like, his comments are public, so anyone can see them. But like if you were technically, at some reviewing outlet and like this was your job and people like look to you to like to have integrity in your reviews and that kind of stuff, like any kind of influence on the review from the developer would be bad.
Right.
So like that would automatically make your reviews uncredible. So like I kind of view it as like, I mean, like I said, you're just doing this for funsies, but like,
well, they still mean something to me. I mean, because see, here's the thing, like, and I've hit this point over the head 1,000 times, but if you look at Tennis Elbow, it says it's a 90% of the user reviews are positive. I think it's really easy to read that as Tennis Elbow is a 9 out of 10 game.
Right.
And so that's kind of the reason that I get all up in Steam's business and write all these reviews with other numbers on them, because I don't want people to sort of be duped like I was, or not even like I was, because it wasn't an awful experience. It just wouldn't be something I would say, well, yeah, other people need to get involved in this noise.
Yeah. And yeah, it's hard to, this is a whole nother topic, but it's hard to, because all you can do is thumbs up or thumbs down. So I don't know if that translates into a 9 out of 10, but.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't. But I think it's kind of, I don't know what it really gives you. Yeah, but like, what does it really even give you? Like, what info does that give you?
But I mean, he's straight up trying to change your review and your opinion, and like Paul and Ryan said, like, it's one thing if they actually took that, because like at my job, I work on software and I interact with UI and UX people, and like they're good about actually changing the product to make things easier for people to understand, not just being like, hey, yeah, I know it's not great, but I designed it this way, and you can still do what you want if you do, steps A through, Q.
Yeah. I designed it for me.
Yeah, that's a terrible response.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I think that we should point out here is like user experience design. That's like an entire profession. Like companies spend bajillions of dollars per year making their websites, their apps, their this, their that, their whatever easy for people to use. So the developer doesn't get to just dismiss the entire field of UX design because he says, I made this for me. Like that stuff's still really important. And in some ways, like what Will ended up like telling him, like to me, if I'm a developer, that's the feedback that I couldn't pay enough money to get that, like you just gave me all this stuff. It's like, wow, you're right. I need to go in and change this, which is like most companies don't even get that feedback. The person just stops using the product, So I think that you actually went a step beyond what most consumers do. That's a really
good point.
Like you gave him feedback to make his product better, and companies also pay bajillions of dollars for that feedback. And I don't think it's a great response for him just to turn around and say, well, I made this for me. Okay, well, that's fine. Like it's your game. It's your program. You can do whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that I have to recommend it to someone else. That's sort of the quid pro quo here.
Gotcha. The part where he wants you to update it is the part that rubs me the wrong way.
Yes.
Right. Well,
because your experience is your experience.
Right. Okay. Well, I just thought that would be an interesting thing to discuss, and I was also kind of wanting to get some extra feedback on it. So I appreciate that, guys.
No, that was actually really awesome. That was a good thing to bring up. I feel invigorated now. Well, I think that's probably going to bring us just about to the end of this ATACS episode number 33. We have been adults. We've been talking about cool stuff.
Talk about what we're doing next.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about what we're doing next. You stole my transition. That's okay.
Didn't know if it was coming up or not.
It definitely wasn't, but I'm going to pretend that it was.
Great.
So we're going to start with Ryan. What are you going to be doing next, Ryan?
I think I'm going to keep kicking with the things I've been doing. So Dead Space, I'll probably try to finish that. Final Fantasy, Monster Hunter, and maybe some of this game called Vermintide 2. Might be trying to poke around with that if things work out.
I am interested in your opinion on Vermintide 2, so I selfishly hope that you'll pick up that soon. What about you, Will?
Well, luck would have it, Paul, that I also bought Vermintide 2 and played it last night with Ryan.
Ooh.
So we should have some more opinions for you on that. In addition to that, I'll probably keep riding the Grim Dawn train. They just released that there's going to be a second chunky expansion, which seems like it would be something I'm excited about, but it's kind of not because
this was a funny conversation. Well,
yeah, just because I mean, even if they made a new class, I'd have to start, and there's so much content I'd have to replay, and I might play through the expansions with the characters I already have. But probably, I don't know. I can't imagine myself creating another character from scratch. That just would be a little bit too much investment.
So you have not, as far as I know, have not stopped playing Grim Dawn since it came out. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many characters you've made and how many hours you played?
Hours is 190.
Okay.
Plate characters, maybe 4, I think.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and other than that, I've been messing around on the single-player front with a game called Mainlining, which is sort of like a hacknet-esque hacking simulator thing. I like pretending that I'm super savvy and I'm rocking it on the dark web.
All right.
So, anyway, but yeah, that's what I've been messing with.
Getting some cyber up in here.
Right?
Oh man, sounds exciting.
Yeah.
All right, Flex. What do you have coming up next?
I'm going to keep living in my Monster Hunter and Into the Breach rabbit holes because both of those games are very deep rabbit holes to live in. I still really want to play Celeste. I'm going to be traveling next month, so maybe that'll be a good time for that. Play it on the Switch. It's also this game that comes out this week called Burnout Paradise Remastered.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
I think that might be a pretty good game. So some might call it the best driving game ever made. I don't know.
Some might call it the best game of 2008 as well.
I don't know. I feel like there were some people who sort of liked the first Burnout, maybe a little bit, but I don't know.
I don't think anyone liked the first Burnout. But yeah, I don't know. I might check. Burnout Paradise is one of those games that, like, I feel like every month I'm like, man, I could really play some more Burnout Paradise right now.
And
so maybe this will be the push I need to actually play more Burnout Paradise. But I don't know.
Nice.
In the near future, it's going to be pretty much all Into the Breach and Monster Hunter World and moving because I'm doing that.
Yeah. So good luck on the moving. Hire people. That's what I did, and that made it a lot easier. Nope, you're not going to hire me. I am not strong enough for that. But yeah, that sounds awesome. As far as for me, I'm going to continue to play through the Final Fantasy 15 episodes. I don't think that they're super long. Other than that, I'll probably still just continue poking and prodding at Stardew Valley for maybe another 4 or 5 hours top, just to go through all the seasons once. And I think kind of beyond that, I'm going to have a hole as far as video games goes, so that means I'm either going to start something brand new or just go back to playing Age of Empires 2, which is kind of what I've done since around 1999. So it just depends on how much gumption that I've really got. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. So anyway, that's what we've got coming up. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it here. Gonna going to come back in your news feeds in 2 weeks or so from today, which is near the end of March. And we'll see what we got to talk about, how much stuff that we have to play, and if Will has any more interesting interactions with developers on Steam. So we'll see what happens with that in the next 2 weeks. Thank you for listening, and we will see you then.